How significant is the Grand Renaissance Dam for Ethiopia to realize its full potential? Is this something that really over time you and your peers in the government think is going to transform the entire economy?
Oh, it's very significant. Yes, it has serious impact on the economic development endeavors of the country. That's one thing, but
because the capacity, it'll have enough capacity to cater to the whole country and beyond,
yes.
Correct?
But the most important aspect of the Renaissance Dam is the kind of example it sets to the rest of the world that we were able to build the largest possible dam on the Nile without having to seek the financial support of the rest of the world. It would send the signal that it would be foolhardy for the international community to try and stop us from building other projects which are far less significant than the Renaissance Dam. So this is the largest possible dam that could be built on the Nile.
And we just want to be clear: this was financed by Ethiopians themselves,
yes,
and the diaspora. Obviously, we had Trump take credit for it a couple of weeks ago.
No,
he
misspoke. I have no problem with President Trump trying to take credit for anything and everything, and let him take the credit.
Right.
I don't think it would be. Would detract from
sure.
the reality of the dam itself. So, so you're able to build the dam on our own. Okay. So, other possible projects over the dam, over the Nile, could only be far less significant than the Renaissance Dam. So it would be foolhardy for the Egyptians to try and to stop other projects which are far smaller than the Renaissance Dam. And I'll give you how important. I'll also give you additional examples how to show how important the Renaissance Dam was.
Can we just say, just to be clear for our listeners here, the issue for the Egyptians is they're arguing that obviously it's going to affect water security, not just in Egypt, but in Sudan as well.
The Egyptians are steeped in the tradition of trying to establish that they are historically entitled to the exclusive use of Nile waters.
And they're citing a colonial-era
deal
that was made.
The colonial-era treaties, even the Egyptians didn't sign it. They didn't sign that treaty. Most of the colonial-era treaties were signed by the British, both on behalf of the Egyptians, on behalf of the Sudanese, and probably the only one that was signed between two seemingly independent African nations, Egypt and Sudan, was the 1959 agreement. But it excluded Ethiopia. Now, the thing is, if the Nile, if the Egyptians insist that it is their historic right to maintain exclusive control over Nile waters, it defies geography, it defies common sense, it defies any notion of fair play or justice. So the thing is, Ethiopians have been living in misery for centuries on end, and of course, 86% of Nile waters comes from the Ethiopian highlands. Now the question is, if Ethiopia were to decide to divert Nile waters to the detriment of the Egyptians, that would be quite unjust, and no one in their right mind would condone that kind of practice, that kind of intention, much less a practice. So now the question is, there has to be the sense of realization on the part of the Egyptians and the Sudanese that just harping on the same old string that Egypt is entitled to its historic rights is almost meaningless. Now, the Egyptians are very clever. And of course, they have their own experts in every international institution. Even the whole idea of historic right doesn't, in fact, get much traction among the international community. So they come up with what they call water security. Water security is another form of arguing for historic rights. But granted that we have to make sure that Egyptians are not going to be affected. But they have to come to terms with the fact that Ethiopians also will have to use Nile waters. I'll give you an example. Tekeze, when we first built a dam over Tekeze, which the Sudan is called Atbara, which is another tributary to the Nile, the Sudanese realized that, well, despite their original uproar against the dam, they realized that the building of the dam in the highlands of Tigray,
your home region,
yes, simply meant that they were able to reclaim more than 250,000 hectares of land, which they could harvest year in and year out. So the added advantage for them was water was being regulated. Of course, some of the dams in Sudan, such as Rosris, Jebel Aulia, and all those places, they were full of siltation because of the amount of earth that comes to them from the highlands of Ethiopia. So with the dams being built upstream, the rate of siltation not only decreases, but at the same time, the water being regulated simply means that the Sudanese were able to harvest additional 250 hectares. With the Al-Nahda, with the Renaissance Dam, they will be able to harvest another 10 million hectares. So to the extent that there is an issue for the Egyptians to fret over, it's not going to be with Ethiopia, it's going to be with Sudan, because most of the benefit in terms of harvesting, in terms of using it for irrigation, could only accrue to Sudan, not Ethiopia, because the Renaissance Dam it cannot be used for irrigation purposes because it's very close to the Sudanese border. So, but the problem with the Egyptian narrative is that they are frozen in a historic narrative that they cannot let go of, and things have changed and changed forever. So that's the kind of stuff what needs to take into account.
Are any of their concerns justified? Like, what happens if there's a drought, for example? Will that affect flow or not at all?
Well, if there is a drought, the drought doesn't particularly happen to Ethiopia. It happens to the rest of the world. I would tell you a Tigrinya saying where if a crisis befalls in the entire humanity, you might as well enjoy it as an opportunity. If it happens to you, it becomes a tragedy. But it happens to the rest of the world, it's going to be. But now the question is, if Egyptians, for example, were wise enough to wise up to changing circumstances, they would avoid, for example, the use of Nile waters as though they were being like harvested in their backyards. Why would Egyptians be in the business of, for example, harvesting rice, which more often than not requires a swampy land, and of course, huge amount of moisture and all that. And why would they be interested in building golf courses and everything? That requires tons of amount of water and all that. So their water management should be given a priority rather than trying to stop Ethiopia from using its fair share of the Nile resources. But it would be also quite irresponsible and, of course, unfair and unjust for Ethiopia to try to stop the Egyptians from getting their fair share of Nile waters.